Released in 1990 by Taito, Growl is a unique entry into the beat-em-up genre. Set in the early 20th century, poachers are hunting exotic animals to the point of extinction. The only thing standing in their way are 4 rough-and-tumble members of the Ranger Corps. Each of the 4 characters have different attack, jump, and life stats. However, during the course of a playthrough, it's difficult to notice much of a difference between them. Even their appearances are similar, with 2 wearing Indiana Jones-inspired fedoras, and the other 2 wearing bandanas. Plus, all 4 of them are wearing shirts missing a ton of buttons to show off their muscles. At the start of the game, the Rangers are ambushed in their bar by the poachers, where they display their toughness by surviving a grenade blast by ducking and covering. Wanting to get off to a good start, the game gives you 4 rocket launchers to use, which is quickly followed by a machine gun. Enjoy them now because neither weapon shows up again until very late in the game. There are 3 general types of enemies, which come in the usual color variant varieties that let you know you were facing a tougher version. There's the 1920s paperboy who looks like he's an extra from Peaky Blinders, there's the business suit woman who is fighting in high heels, and there are some extras from Temple of Doom. The paperboys primarily fight with their fists, however some will occasionally show up with knives. The business ladies are much more formidable with their jump kicks and their never-ending supply of grenades which they pull from their shirts. And the Temple of Doom goons often show up carrying whips, which surprisingly enough is the best weapon in the game, but we'll get to that in a moment. The arcade cabinet made it possible to have 4 players battling against the poachers simultaneously, and the designers went out of their way to make sure there were enough enemies on screen to keep everyone busy. Unfortunately, they didn't do any difficulty scaling, which means if you're playing solo, you're going to have your hands full. There can routinely be 10 to 15 enemies coming at you simultaneously, and it can get overwhelming very quickly. This issue was complicated by the fact that you have absolutely no invincibility frames outside of when you begin your game. This makes it far too easy to get caught into a damage loop where you have enemies on either side of you beating you as soon as you stand up. And if you happen to be standing over a weapon while surrounded, you might as well get another credit ready, because your default action will be to pick that weapon up and you'll be knocked to the ground as you do. Outside of the overpowered rocket launchers from the beginning of the game, there are also pistols, grenades, knives, swords, steel bars, and the whip. There are also single-use thrown items like boulders and boxes, as well as explosive barrels that will detonate a few seconds after they are struck. The pistol is nice but short-lived as you only have 6 bullets. Grenades are incredibly powerful and can quickly turn a throng of enemies into bloodied limbs. The swords and steel bars extend your reach a bit, but they are difficult to hang on to for any length of time. And then there's the whip. Thanks to its extreme reach and rear protection it provides, you can clear out an entire screen of enemies without fear of being touched. As you progress through the levels, there will be some brief cutscenes where the poachers are trapping animals such as lions, birds, and elephants. If you're able to free them, then the animals will come to your aid and help beat down their oppressors. Sometimes it's minimal help, like the bird keeping an enemy occupied. Other times they'll clear the screen for you when a group of them stampede through. And then there's the downright absurd, like when a tank pulls up and is taken out by an elephant that headbutts it. This particular incident is doubly absurd because after the tank is disabled, 9 enemies climb out of it. It's like a clown tank. The bosses vary in difficulty to an extreme degree. The first boss is a truck-throwing dynamite man that is fairly formidable as a first boss. If you knock him down, he jumps up and explodes before doing a flailing arm run at you, which can be difficult to dodge. Even with that, this feels like a fair fight. The second boss is significantly weaker, as it's just half a dozen large fez-wearing men. On their own, it can be a tough fight, however thanks to the water pit at the bottom of the screen, they can be made quick work of. That said, make sure you beat the last one to death, because it's humorous to hit someone so hard that they explode. When you get to the Masked Wrestler boss, go ahead and budget 3 to 4 credits, because he's insanely difficult. If you're close to him, he'll pummel you. If you move away, he'll clothesline you. During several playthroughs, my most effective move against him was dying and using the new game's spiked ceiling attack. It's a great strategy if you're on MAME, not so much if you're using quarters. Near the end of the game, there's a strange platforming level that really feels like it was tacked on to pad the runtime of this really short game. It's not particularly challenging since you can't walk off the edge, and if you happen to miss a jump, it barely hurts you and moves you forward in the stage. It's a bit of a relief they did it this way because the controls don't really lend itself to precise jumping. The final stage is your typical beat-em-up final stage, where you refight a bunch of previous bosses before taking on the big bad. The refights are just as frustrating as you might imagine, with the Masked Wrestler showing back up as well as a trio of the Dynamite guys. It is way too easy to get caught in a never-ending damage loop since someone is always punching or exploding. The only saving grace is that there's a rocket launcher that shows up, which can help clear the field, provided it doesn't get knocked out of your hands and off the screen. The final boss is just odd. He looks like the offspring of the Penguin and Vega from Street Fighter, who begins the fight by throwing a tank at you. He also has a built-in rocket launcher and machine gun, which can make getting close to him difficult. But as out of place as it feels, his final form is just plain head-scratching. Rather than attempt to describe what happens, I'll just let the footage play.
What the?
So yeah, apparently everyone was controlled by a 10-foot-tall demon worm that was living in this mutant's back. And if you thought any of the previous boss battles were frustrating, you haven't seen anything yet. The worm is only vulnerable about 10% of the time, and you can typically only land 1 or 2 blows before he starts spinning rapidly. So if you don't get out of there in time, expect to lose half your health since just as you are standing up, you get knocked back down again. And good luck playing it safe by keeping your distance because he spits heat-seeking missiles at you. This fight feels like Taito had this boss programmed for another game and didn't want the asset to go to waste, so they used it here. Even with its flaws, Growl is an enjoyable beat-em-up. It has 4-player co-op, the screen is constantly filled with enemies to take on, and you get to see an elfin destroy a tank. Definitely worth a playthrough if you enjoyed the genre.